Hey, what's up, everybody? Andrew Dawson here. I want to share with you two laws that have been written that have tremendously helped the anti-human trafficking movement. Okay, so let's get into this. Law number one, it's called the TVPA. It was written in October of 2000, over 20 years ago. This came into existence. An incredible law that changed the landscape of the anti-human trafficking movement. So the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act that was voted in 2000, it was the first comprehensive federal law in the United States that addressed human trafficking, and it was key for a few reasons. This was a big moment. So up until this time, there really wasn't a legal code or a law in place that separated and specifically focused on this term human trafficking. It was they had to use a lot of other laws that connected to a specific situation of trafficking, but it wasn't defined in the legal system. And so it was signed in October, and it has since that time had numerous amendments and numerous laws added to it to increase the effectiveness of this law. So an incredible moment. The TVPA is like the mothership of laws that inspired and launched numerous trafficking organizations all around the United States at this moment. This was kind of an uptick in, hey, let's go after traffickers. There's some laws in place. Like, it was an inspiration and a huge move forward for the fight against human trafficking. And so there's three things that are really important about this law, and I want to share those with you today real quick. And so number one is it defined human trafficking separate from prostitution. Up until this time, a victim of human trafficking would walk into a court and they could potentially, because of the training, the education, the culture around this issue, it really wasn't widely understood. A victim of human trafficking could have been prosecuted for prostitution. And obviously a trafficker could have been prosecuted as well with inside that. But up until 2000, when the TVPA Act was created, many victims were prosecuted for prostitution. And so one of the big things in this law, in this bill, was it defined human trafficking separate from prostitution. And so secondly, this is the second part of this, is that it allowed judges, it allowed prosecutors, the legal system, to prosecute traffickers separately, and it increased prosecution on the trafficker side. So sentences were increased, and it was easier to just focus on the trafficker. And then third, it protected victims. And so when these cases would come in, the legal system had a code. They had an opportunity to get a victim help, to not prosecute them because this was something that happened to them, and they could get them help that they needed, and then they could prosecute the traffickers separately. I know this sounds crazy, and you think they would be able to do this, but before this moment, but this was a pivotal moment with the TVPA. And so this is kind of the foundational law that a lot of laws and a lot of amendments have come into play over the last 20 years. And this is kind of the base moment where we had a huge leap forward in the fight against human trafficking. And so the second law I want to share with you guys today is called the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, or SESTA, SESTA. And SESTA's main aim is aimed at Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So there's this other law, the Communications Decency Act, which basically says if you're a website or a platform online, you're not responsible for the content that the individuals who subscribe to your platform or your website, when they post stuff, when they put stuff online, you're not responsible for what they post. And this is in itself, if you're a fan of freedom of speech, this is probably something you would agree with. I think I do as well. Like, hey, I want to be able to put online what I want to put online. But unintentionally, what happened with this Communications Decency Act was they allowed for traffickers to prostitute women online. Online ads were created. It was easier to disseminate child pornography to the buyers, and so it just basically turned this internet open land into an open landscape, the Wild West. And so traffickers, child pornographers, nefarious purposes, whatever criminal activity was allowed to not be held back in any way, and they could do what they wanted. Now they could still be prosecuted if it was found, but it allowed those websites to go off scot-free. They could build a platform and invite the whole world, including traffickers. And so what this amendment to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, it's not just the Communications Decency Act, but Section 230, to be clear, was it modified that section to exclude protections for those websites and platforms that knowingly facilitate sex trafficking. And so this is really cool. And so what this did was focus specifically on sex trafficking, child prostitution, and say, hey, if you're harboring, if you're participating in this, then you are going to be able to be prosecuted in a court of law. And if they found out through investigation if these sites were knowingly allowing ads or content related to sex trafficking on the platforms, it created new criminal defense for those who operate and support those online platforms. And so this was a massive loophole that was out there for traffickers, and being able to prosecute these sites who knowingly had this information on them allowed us to dig in deeper and to, or the legal system to dig in deeper and prosecute these criminals. So this really, a couple things here, it really affected sites like Pornhub and sites like Craigslist, where you sell your lawnmower online. I mean, you could sell your lawnmower, you could sell stuff. We've all used Craigslist before in the past, but they also had the adult section and those areas where escorts or prostituted women could put their ads up. And so this really focused on them to pull those sections down. And as we've seen in the past, there's been some major lawsuits with Pornhub and Craigslist too. So which also led to forced sex workers being identified and rescued. So two very key laws that went into place. One, and the SESTA, this amendment to 230, it actually went in 2018. So very recently, this law went into place, which made a massive difference in the fight against human trafficking. And so one last thing that SESTA led to was provisions that enabled victims to seek restitution for the damage and trauma that had been done, and to get paid for those or to sue these sites, get restitution for those who had profited from their exploitation through these online platforms, which was really, really cool. So they were able to go after them and say, hey, you knew about this, you turned a blind eye, we're going to go after you and get restitution. So there's a lot of spokes to the wheel of this anti-human trafficking movement. There's just a lot of areas we can get involved in, and the legal system is one of those. And as of the making of this video, just recently, just a few days ago, I believe it was California, just voted in another law to increase prosecution for traffickers in California. It was approved, and they're going to push it to a federal law. Hopefully it gets approved. But it increases sentencing to a much higher sentence for those who are guilty of underage trafficking, trafficking of minors, as well as trafficking of adults as well. So super cool movements forward. It takes everyone, it takes us all to make an impact in the fight against human trafficking. So two laws that have saved millions of lives.